What's up, Region 4? This is Jeremy Chance with the Region 4 Communications Committee with the latest edition of our COVID Conversation series. Today, we got a special treat. We're coming at you with two schools from Missouri. We got Missouri State and Southeast Missouri on the call with us today. So I'll go ahead and let Ashley introduce herself, and then we'll go ahead and go around the room.
Yeah, hi. I'm Ashley Llewellyn, and I am the Director of Campus Recreation here at Missouri State University.
And I'm Lauren Easter. I'm the Associate Director of Campus Recreation at Missouri State University and the State of Missouri Director at this time.
And joining us on the call, not to put him on the spot, but we got Red, go ahead and introduce yourself. We are recording, so you're good to go.
All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody. Sorry I'm late. I got basically I got told I needed to put in an emergency operations plan today regarding intramural sports and how we want to so I was sitting there writing that up and editing, and then Hannah called me. So thank you for the call, Hannah.
You're welcome.
I think everybody knows me. I'm Red with Rec Services here at SEMO.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm the Assistant Director of Facilities Rec Services at SEMO.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have these four join us for the call. And we may have Red an example of jumping on in the middle of the call. We may have somebody jump off to attend other meetings. So that's just the beauty of these remote meetings. So again, I wanted to thank you all for joining us for this COVID conversation. We'll just start off first, just talk a little bit about some of the larger, significant, or maybe more unique challenges that have come with, or changes rather, to reopening your facilities. Ashley or Lauren, we'll go and start with the Missouri State folks first.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I'll go ahead and start, Lauren, and if you want to chime in on some things. I'm thinking kind of bigger changes, right? So, you know, a couple of things. One is access. Who is allowed in and out of our operations currently has been a pretty significant change just for being able to trace and contact, and the way that has specifically worked with student fees. And so the budget process and how we're not assessing fees for the summer, but yet we're still trying to offer memberships for students. So kind of big picture, we've really limited access, but yet we've kind of increased access for some of our students. I would say probably another big change is the level of accountability for sanitation. That is something that our professional staff has, all of us, and myself included, are all taking shifts and working our floor to make sure that we're demonstrating, you know, what we feel is adequate and appropriate sanitation protocols. And so while we've always been a clean facility, and I'm sure other universities feel the same way, I think the presence level has increased significantly with our professional staff, and kind of the standards have changed a little bit.
Yeah, I would add on one more thing, and it's something that I think is more nationwide and not specific to just reopening, but Ashley mentioned our pro staff are working those facility shifts, which, you know, that's difficult to be somewhere at a specific time. My gosh. It's been such an adjustment, but we're in that situation not only for budgetary reasons, but also because our student employees are potentially collecting unemployment and they're making more money. So we're having a difficult time, or they've, you know, had to take on jobs elsewhere and they're making more money than what we can offer. So we're having a difficult time staffing our facility at this time. And so that's been something that has been unexpected. I don't know what world I was living in, but I expected them to come back and, you know, be jumping for joy. So that was a little hard to take at first.
Red, Hannah, what are maybe some of the larger changes y'all have made?
Well, Hannah, if you don't mind real quick, this is mostly Hannah's staff, but Lauren, one tip that Hannah's done a great job of is she went and recruited a whole bunch of international students because they needed employment to stay in the country and not get sent home. And so we have a wonderful staff this summer of a bunch of new faces. We have a very diverse staff anyway, because we've always back when I was the assistant director of facilities in Hannah's role, we really did a good job of recruiting a lot of international students anyway, because they're right on campus. They work every break for us. We just have a great relationship with our international village. And then Hannah went out and took that a step beyond. And so I would say, man, just winging it, I would say probably about 75% of our staff
or more
is international student this summer, which is great. It's just wonderful. And they're so appreciative of it because, of course, the alternative might have been to get sent home.
Right.
I guess as far as your question with changes, we had a lot since we've been open. Things have changed a lot, kind of day to day, week to week. So we've made a lot of changes and then went back and did different changes and then went back and did the same changes. So it's hit and miss. I know at first, when we very first opened, you were talking about limiting who comes in and out of the building. We were not allowing any additional memberships to be bought. So no new memberships and no guest passes. So that limited to people who are current members or students only. Something else that we didn't allow was like competitive play. So that kind of, and our pool was not open for recreational swims. So that kind of limited people who wanted to buy a guest pass anyway. So that kind of helped us out because most of our guest passes are people who want to come and play a pickup game of basketball or go swim in the pool. And we weren't allowing that anyway. So they really had no desire to come in. And then we actually took a step forward and started allowing guest passes and memberships. And then the next phase, we actually started allowing competitive play. And now we've actually stepped backwards again. So we are still doing guest passes and memberships, but we're back to not allowing any competitive play. So I have noticed a pretty big decrease in guest passes just because of that factor. People don't really care to come in and pay for a guest pass just to work out when they could go somewhere else cheaper for a day pass or whatever, you know. A lot of them come in to play pickup ball and we're not allowing it again, so they don't care to come.
Sure. Yeah, right, go ahead.
I'd like to add to that. I know Jeremy asked over email to be prepared to discuss why we chose to go back to no competitive play. And I just want to address that real quick. Well, first of all, Lauren and Ashley, Hannah and I were covering the building shifts along with the rest of the professional staff right before we sent the students home. So there was a few days there where Mike and Chad, they covered the early shift. We had a little swing shift in there where then Hannah and I would come in and Hannah and I would close the building because we're the night owls. They're the early work out better that way. And then, but then we sent all the students home. You know, we went on shutdown. When we came back in May is when we reopened. And phase one was May to June. And we were allowed to bring back student staff right away, which was great because we went back to kind of more traditional office hours then. But at that point, May to June is when it was no competitive play, very, very safe, very, very careful. In June, we allowed competitive play, started doing the guest passes again. We still didn't open the leisure pool. But then what happened was our county numbers started to spike. And so that scared a lot of people. And of course, students are returning to campus at this point. Student athletes are back on campus. County numbers are starting to spike. In our county, which I'm sure is very similar to yours, is that 20 to 29 age group is the highest amount of cases, but 0 hospitalizations. So it was just scaring people. Also, we have our president works out in our building almost every night. Our provost works out in our building almost every night. So they're on a treadmill overlooking one of the gyms and they're watching competitive basketball going on with college age students. And they're asking us, why are we allowing that when, you know, blah, 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 blah. So we had to dial back. So rather than close our doors, we had to make some provisions. This was right at the same time that I was about to be asking if we could start allowing more than 10 people in the weight room. So it was bad timing for me. So I decided not to go ahead and ask for more people allowed in a space.
But I think that, but I think that highlights just kind of the ever-changing nature of all of this. Lauren, you kind of touched on kind of one of those unforeseen things with the challenges of staffing. You know, what are maybe some of those other things that maybe you weren't able to anticipate or plan for and kind of were figuring out on the fly? And you both, Missouri State's been open, a few weeks here, and SEMA a little longer than that. What are maybe some of those unforeseen challenges that you didn't know until you had to live it?
Well, that is a little tough for us. We are one of those lucky scenarios that in our first week of reopening, things went really well. I thought, and we had a staff meeting and we talked about how well it was. I think on the back end, since we're talking to all these campus recreation professionals and if they're going to start their reopening, we were in a situation before we opened where a lot of our staff were put into a furlough situation. And so we had a lot of people taking on responsibilities that weren't actually theirs, including myself. And so whenever everyone joined back into our team by June 22nd, I believe, was the start of everybody coming back. And that was an unforeseen issue that it was not difficult to navigate, but it took a lot of learning to realize, hey, you're right, that's not mine. I need to release that and give that back to you, or that is mine. I need to concern myself with that. And so we actually just worked through a lot of that the past 2 months of this is yours, this is yours, this is yours, and doing all of those responsibilities back to each of those pro staff. So that was something unforeseen that, like as somebody on one end, I was like, oh, I'm being so helpful. And then the next second it was like, hey, you didn't tell me. So that was something that Ashley and our other associate director brought to my attention that was like, oh, thank goodness, somebody told me.
Yeah, just to kind of support that, that's what I was going to say from an administrator standpoint. I think that, I had this idea that our staff would come back and maybe feel like, I don't know, yes, I'm ready to be back and I'm ready to move forward. And then I think it became, which is human nature, kind of a territorial thing, right? Like, this is my job. And so people just became ultra defensive of their task and responsibilities. And it makes sense. It's job security. But from my standpoint as a director, I expected people to come in and egos aside, everybody's willing to learn anything. Everyone's willing to teach anything to make us successful. And that's a great vision, but it's just not reality when it's something so personal. So that was going to be a challenge. And then I was just thinking too, from another kind of administration standpoint, is the fact that our department is moving so much faster than the rest of the university. We were one of the first facilities to close, yet the first facility to open. And so we need answers faster than what they're being provided. And so, the challenge of, we still don't even have a finalized mask policy for campus, right? But I had to make a decision before we ever opened what the expectation of our employees was going to be. And so just kind of being able to jump in and say, okay, we're making this decision, and then, we'll kind of worry about it a little bit later. But you had to have something in place in order to move forward. And we're dealing with the same thing now. If a student today, an employee, or even a professional staff, test positive, what's the protocol? What's the step? I just posted something in the NIRSA community today about that, because everything's been so focused on reopening, and now we are fortunate to be reopening, but how do we stay open? And so that's a big challenge. I would say that's just kind of, I assumed that these answers would be provided.
That was part of our conversation with the folks at Wichita State. They were that exact scenario. They had a case where some of their students were at a party and potentially exposed, and what did they do? And it almost like the university hadn't thought that far ahead yet. So it's almost like their department was the guinea pigs and kind of needing to figure it out and be that example. And so I think we all hope that our universities kind of have those plans in place as we may be some of the first offices to open up. Rhett or Hannah, any challenges or unforeseen things in your arenas?
Well, I was just going to say, you just mentioned guinea pigs, and I was in a meeting with our enrollment management crew, like 70 people. I'm looking around, and there's like 3 of us working from our real offices. Everybody else is at home.
Sure.
And I literally made the joke. I said, yeah, you know, we're basically Las Vegas at this point. We are the university's guinea pigs. And just like Ashley said, we were lucky enough to reopen back in May. We have been lucky enough to stay open. Sure. And so far, so good. We've had a couple staff that have had COVID. And it was, you know, we're going off of our county. And I talked to one of our safety officers in the county, and it's like, how many steps away do we have to be and not shut down? And so we've been required, we've basically just made our own rules, because if we wait for our emergency, we have an EOC, Emergency Operations Committee, and they meet once a week. They send out information on, you know, Friday right at closing time to tell us to do a whole bunch of other stuff every week. And we just do our own thing. We're above and beyond as far as what they're doing. So right away when we reopened, we said, okay, masks are required for our staff. So we just required masks from day one for our staff. We're paying them. So if they want a paycheck, they wear the mask. Hannah and I and the rest of the staff, we're very much lead by example people. So when we're not in our offices, when we're out visible on the floor, we're wearing our masks as well. And then just what was it, Hannah, last Monday?
I think it was last Monday, our county had a mask order go into effect. So then the university actually put out theirs on that Friday evening. So we knew it was coming.
Right.
So we've had to implement that, which has proved to be rather challenging, even though you would think people are sort of accustomed to that at this point. Our staff are really good about it. They've been in the habit already because they've been wearing masks, but getting people in the habit, patrons coming in to wear their mask has been kind of challenging. And even then, since last Monday, it's changed. So it started with you just have to wear your mask when you walk in the building. Right. And now we're actually, sorry, Red, if I'm stealing your thunder here, but now we're actually to the point where if you are working out, you still have to have a mask on if you can't be 6 feet apart from somebody. However, we had already set up our cardio equipment to be socially distanced 6 feet apart. So that makes it really easy for people who want to run on a treadmill. They can, because they're not within 6 feet of another person, and they can take their mask down. But they have to have it with them. Right. As soon as they get off and walk away, they've got to put it back on. Now, our weight room's kind of a different story. It's not as easily spread out. So we still have a 10-person limit in there. And then at a certain point, you know, if you're not able to be 6 feet apart, even walking to the water fountain or something, you have to put that mask back on. So earlier I went out and there were probably 8 people in there, and everyone had to have a mask on because there's just no way to the entire time remain 6 feet apart from other people. So it's been challenging to get people to follow that. Sometimes everyone, when you approach them, is very understanding. But trying to get people to actually do it without having to approach them, it's interesting.
Yeah, so, for sure.
They're pretty understanding when you especially tell them, you know, it's a rule that's set up by the university. If you guys want to get to come in here and continue using this facility, you got to help us out and follow the rules, because if we don't follow these rules and something happens, you're not going to be able to come in here anymore because it's going to be shut down. So, and a lot of
help us stay open.
Yeah, it's a very help us, help you. If you want to come here and hang out and work out and whatever, like you've got to get with us on these rules. And I really haven't had any issues personally with anybody being upset after talking about it in that light. So it's hit and miss, but mostly people, when you start talking to them about it, they're pretty good about that. So that's been definitely a change that's been difficult. So.
Sure. Lauren, we'll try and catch you before you've got to run here. As the state representative for Missouri, maybe in some of those conversations you're having with colleagues across your state, what are some of the challenges specific to programming? I feel like so much of these conversations are focused around how we're reconfiguring our spaces, or the focus is, hey, let's just get independent exercise going. What are maybe some of those conversations at the state level in regards to programming?
Sure. As I mentioned, or at least everybody on this call except for you, Jeremy, knows our state is definitely in a we're in a weird situation, as well as the rest of the country, that no matter what they're doing at SEMO or what we're doing at Missouri State, they can't do it in St. Louis. And so that's just a weird situation to be in our field, that usually we don't have to reinvent the wheel, that once Kansas makes the wheel, we can take it and make it into a motorcycle. And that's just really not the case with COVID. And so programming is definitely different. I know that at Missouri State in particular, I feel not scared to talk about it, but it's one of those things that we have put off for as long as we can at this point. So we'll be discussing those. And I know that at WashU, Jamaica Cannon wanted to specifically talk about that in our state meeting, but there wasn't time to do it. And so we're actually having a side conversation about it on August 4th. And so limitations within our state is the difference between what Sydney ordinances are. Even in St. Louis, they talked about the differences between St. Louis City and St. Louis County, that the two the ordinances are different in mask requirement,
right,
as well as social distancing. And so programming is going to be one of those situations that it's definitely going to be dependent on your university, what your university officials are saying, your city. And so I know even in Texas, it's a maximum of 4 people participating in it in any kind of activity. And so that really limits intramural sports. Here in Missouri, at least in Springfield, it's basically not a free-for-all, but wear a mask, don't wear a mask. It's based on your occupancy of your seat, of your arena or stadium. And no longer the actual competition. And that may go back, it may go forward. SEMO's experiencing that, obviously, of what they could do. So at this time, the state of Missouri, no schools have planned programming yet. We're all getting our facilities open to a success rate of, being pretty good. But programming, it's up in the air. And so I wish I could help more with our region, but at this time, clubs, intramurals, fitness, personal training, outdoor adventure trips. I mean, all of that is just a maybe to a no.
Sure.
So
we'll go ahead and we'll wrap up the conversation. Maybe just one or two quick little nuggets or bits of advice for the region. Ashley, we'll go ahead and start with you before you've got to hop off.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the main thing is to really, like I said, kind of think outside of the scope of your normal duties. Ask for help and provide help. I think if ever there's a time to be a team player, this is it. I kind of also mentioned, not waiting for the university to make decisions for you. And that's just so unorthodox, probably to my style and most of us, in my position. But we're a unique operation, and so we have to come up with different solutions. But rely on your staff. They want to help. They're willing to help, and often they're better at certain things than you are too. And so let that go and focus on the things that you need to focus on to move forward.
Awesome. Lauren,
and with that said, no, you're fine. I am going to head out because I do have a staff meeting. So good luck to everyone. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out or contact us. Okay. So awesome. Thank you. Sorry, thanks, Lauren, Ashley. I'll let you go with it and everybody else go. All right. Thanks, guys.
Lauren, little nuggets or bits of advice.
Well, Ashley kind of hit on what I was going to say is reach out because everything is so different. Like we have our folks at SEMO who I feel a lot of people could learn from and use. I mean, although Cape Girardeau is not St. Louis, it's still a rec center that is open at a university. And so those are good examples to use that, they're campus recreation professionals. And I know that just last week, Hannah reached out to me and was like, hey, we have a mask policy, help. And so we talked about it in our state meeting, and I'm sure you watched it, and I'm sure it wasn't helpful because that's how the people at S&T felt of like, why have a mask policy? And so I know a lot of us are in the same boat, and I know that we're all on different boats, but boats are boats in the end. And so I know that it's difficult from time to time to have your own policy, but reach out to others and at least try not to reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. And so that was my tidbit of expertise of so far is ask for help.
Red, parting words of wisdom.
I don't have much wisdom, but I will just tell you that as we are forging ahead, I peeked off to the side because one of the track coaches walked in, wanted to know if we were making any rules as far as their practices. And what I just told him was, you guys go by whatever the NCAA is saying. Let us know when you're going to be in the building, but we're not putting extra rules on their practices unless we get told to by our university and by our EOC, our emergency operations. I am currently, like I said, right now we're writing plans for intramurals. We are planning on going ahead with intramurals as long as we're allowed to. We've split up our sports into high risk for contact,
sure,
medium, and low. And so a high risk for contact would be something like flag football. And so we are going to be required to wear masks the entire time. The only time they can take their masks down is in between plays when they can distance themselves, catch their breath, put the mask back on, get back to the down. Softball, we've classified as medium risk. Again, we're just making this stuff up as we go. Medium risk. And so if you're in the dugout, we try to maintain distance. If you are a baseman, like first base, second base, etc., or you're a base runner, you're going to have to wear your mask then because, of course, you might be in close contact with somebody. Whereas if you're playing the outfield, if the EOC allows us, we're not going to have to wear a mask when you're in the outfield by yourself. It's just, again, you're going to have your mask with you because during the, inning changes. But then we also have some low risks events like pickleball, tennis. Those are the sports that if they'll allow us, we're not going to be required to wear a mask. Again, they might just tell us no. Disc golf, etc. And then, of course, we do esports. So for our esports arena, we are building partitions to make little, plexiglass cubicles and everything. But we're learning as we go.
Sure. Hannah, last words of wisdom.
Be flexible. It's a roller coaster. I mean, truly it changes daily sometimes. Sometimes you get at least a weekend of one set of rules and then switch to another. So that's kind of been my biggest thing. And I'm trying to keep the staff lighthearted because I know they get kind of frustrated with how often everything changes, but they've been real team players and troopers, and I know they kind of get bored. We've ramped up the amount of staff we have. They're actually stationed throughout the building to clean up behind participants when they come through. So they have their areas, and I've treated it almost like lifeguard because I came from an aquatics world, and now I'm in facilities, but so I treat it like lifeguard station, so they rotate and this, that, and the other. But anyways, just trying to be flexible, make changes, try to come up with new ideas to keep people on their toes and so that they're being aware and we're being aware, and just, I don't know, it changes every day. But yeah, feel free to reach out. And if we've tried something and it didn't work or did work, I can let you know what happened, and or we can just bounce ideas back and forth. So
for sure. Well, I want to thank Hannah, Red, Ashley, and Lauren, who had to hop off ahead to a committee meeting or a staff meeting. But thanks for tuning into this edition of the COVID Conversations. We'll include some of these resources from these Missouri representatives and their contact information as well. So thanks, and tune in again next time.